welcome to the SImple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. I'm your host, Shannon Ables, and whether you're listening on your commute, exercising, working in the garden, or sitting down with a hot cup of tea or a café au lait, thank you for tuning in. Let's get started. Welcome to the 65th episode of the SImple Sophisticate. I hope you are ready for a Monday. It is going to be a great week, and hopefully the last weekend was spent getting rejuvenated and ready to roar through this week and make it exactly what it's capable of becoming. With that said, we are going to break down some barriers today. How's that sound? Today's episode is all about stereotypes, and we're going to talk about the 6 ways we each can defy stereotypes in our everyday lives. I'm so excited for this episode. I've been thinking about it for a while now, trying to figure out how to attack it. And I think you're going to be surprised at how simple the process is, but how it will require a conscious effort on our part, which is something we all can do. I'm absolutely confident in that. Before I dive into those 6 ways, I'd like to give you a hint as to what today's Petit Plaisir is. It is a film that I had the opportunity to view over the weekend, and I am going to highly recommend it. It is absolutely worth your time. If you are looking for life inspiration, you will find it in this film. So do stay tuned at the end of today's episode, and I will tell you a lot more about it. All right, let's get to today's topic, stereotypes. I want to begin with a quote from writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She states, "The single story creates stereotypes, and the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the whole story." History and our everyday are filled with stereotypes. Sometimes we don't even realize this, but they're there. Many of us have been subjected and denied opportunities because of them. And more of us than we'd probably care to admit are guilty of perpetuating them. Paul Theroux wrote about the myriad of detrimental stereotypes on men in America in the 1980s in his essay, Being a Man, and Judith Kofer Ortiz defied the stereotypes she examined in The Myth of the Latin Woman. Both positive and negative stereotypes persist, and each are inaccurate and degrading because they simplify the story. And each of us, as we know, is indeed quite complex. From blondes are dumb, to men don't know how to clean, to Italians are good cooks, and even French women don't get fat. Stereotypes are abundant and they are plentiful. Sometimes we don't fight them because they work for us. Okay, French women don't get fat. I am going to follow the lifestyle of the French women. I like that. I want to be thin, right? I don't fight that. I love that book, right? But when we do this, we do ourselves and society no favors by not addressing the destruction they can cause, and thereby doing our due diligence to defy them, we'll help eliminate them. So today I'd like to talk about those 6 ways we can defy stereotypes. Let's get started. Number 1 is to do the homework. The word stereotype is derived from the Greek language. Stereos means firm or solid, and typos means impression. Therefore, the meaning is solid impression. So let's focus on the definition, and especially the term impression. As we know, first impressions are powerful, but they aren't always accurate because the story is incomplete, as reminded by Chimamanda Adichie in her 2009 TED Talk titled The Danger of a Single Story. And if something is incomplete, much like a hamburger without one of the buns, or an article without a conclusion, or a house without a foundation, we don't fully understand what something is or can become. Most stereotypes are rooted in some truth, but while they may have begun because one person somewhere was doing something, that particular action, for whatever reason, became associated with that person's particular sex, their particular race, or their fill in the blank. Such an action does not mean that all that look or act or live in the same way as that particular person should be expected to behave in the same way as we move forward. After all, at the heart of prejudice and then sadly discrimination is a belief in some sort of stereotype. But you see, a stereotype by definition is incomplete and therefore not accurate. So 1, do the homework. 2 is to determine why you do or don't select certain options. I want to begin with another quote by the author Chimamanda Adichie. Show a people as one thing, only one thing, over and over again, and that is what they become. Definitely food for thought. Blue versus pink, computer science versus art, playing with dolls versus playing with cars. From an early age, certain expectations surrounded us. Certain options were made more readily available, and certain choices were applauded or frowned upon. But at the heart of dismantling stereotypes is to get to know ourselves. Why are we choosing to care for a cat rather than a dog? Why are we wearing our hair a certain way or falling lockstep into certain roles, even when we don't feel comfortable in them? At some level, it is hard to determine what is culture and what is chromosome, even if it comes to our likes and dislikes. If we can consciously choose not for approval, but rather authentic satisfaction and stand tall with our decision, we will help gradually break down stereotypes as others see the mold slowly become fractured and inaccurate. So 2, determine why you do or do not select certain options. 3, examine what properties and or qualities are missing and then lead by example. Often the instinct is to fight back, push back in a manner that involves confrontation when we feel that we are being stereotyped or pigeonholed. But if we first do our homework and see how the stereotype is inaccurate, not just knowing that it is, but know the details of it, we discover the qualities that are being overlooked or ignored. To focus on revealing the qualities that are being ignored is to demonstrate that indeed the stereotype is wrong. And when presented to the proper audience, the stereotype can then be thwarted effectively. For example, if crying is believed to signify weakness, we then need to exemplify what it actually reveals when we cry. When we cry in public, it may be to show empathy or compassion, which are both strong, desirous qualities to have in someone in a position of leadership. After all, to be human is to have emotion. The key is not to act on that emotion in that moment, but rather recognize it, understand it, and then after giving ourselves time, make the best rational response moving forward. When we do this, we demonstrate that crying doesn't mean weakness. It means we are human, and we can still make very rational decisions in response to whatever may have occurred to prompt those tears. If we are becoming frustrated, for example, with stereotypes, such as maybe women are being labeled as incapable of becoming president, leading companies, or holding 50% of the seats in Congress, or anything that is blatantly untrue and simply hasn't happened because the majority of people have ingrained into their minds that it isn't possible, then we need to lead by example. We need to change what we see in the world so that the norm is something we are proud to say we know to be true and helped cultivate. The first leaders take the brunt, as we know, but so long as they have supporters to hold them up and ignore the ignorant, change is possible. Change is possible. 4, keep your frustrations in check. This is a tough one, but an absolutely necessary one. Often people don't realize they are making a decision based on pure assumption or an acceptance of a stereotype, whether it is based on one's age and assuming they can no longer do something or wouldn't know how to do something because they're too youthful, or someone's career choice and an assumption of income or knowledge are presumed, or something as ignorant as one's race, assuming either a positive or a negative purely based on ethnicity. Of course, sex as well prompts many assumptions and therefore stereotypes too. If ever you have found yourself in a situation where an assumption is being made about you that shortchanges your opportunities and negates further possibilities, it is understandable why any of us would become frustrated, even enraged. But, often, while it seems unfair, as the one who is being stereotyped has done nothing to deserve such treatment, In order to slow the tide of stereotyping, we must rise above the situation. We must master our emotions. We must speak calmly, or wait until we can speak calmly and outwit the naysayers, or perhaps outperform them, or exceed their expectations, as often actions speak louder than any words. After all, using logic, as Mark Twain reminds us, to argue with someone who is comfortable with their ignorance is most often futile. So number 5, keep your frustrations in check. All right, we have 2 more to get to, but before I get to them, I want to take a quick intermission, and I will see you on the other side. See you in 1 minute. Today's episode about defying stereotypes involves much self-reflection and courage. Each are ingredients necessary for reaching our full potential. If you are in a place in your life where you are getting down and dirty and doing the tough job of reforming your current self, you may enjoy tuning into a couple of past episodes of the SImple Sophisticate. For example, episode number 25 dives into the decision to become self-actualized, which will allow you to think rationally, let go of guilt, step into your own independence, and enjoy life on an entirely different level. Episode 10 offers 5 ways to live an examined life, and episode number 20 shares specific ways to become the master of your mind. Again, those episodes are number 10, number 20, and number 25. Simply visit the simplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast and insert the number, and you will find the show notes and the audio that you're looking for. Or simply tune in and download on iTunes. After all, becoming our best selves is possible, one step at a time. Welcome back. We have 2 more ways to defy stereotypes, and we're getting right into it. Here we go. Number 5 is to not laugh with the crowd. Speaker of the House in the U.S. Congress, John Boehner, is known for being rather emotional and has from time to time shown himself to be quite moved as his public displays with tears being wiped away are caught on camera. In fact, when Pope Francis arrived in Washington, D.C. at the end of September this past month, Boehner was seen tearing up as he was standing directly behind the Pope. Many press, upon reporting his response, teased, laughed, or chuckled, which presents the idea that something is wrong with what he is doing. But not all news journalists did. Some did as they are trained to do, simply reported. The key to, for example, in this case, shifting the idea that it is emasculating to cry is not to participate in the finger-pointing and mocking aftermath that follows. The reason any of us who falls prey to relying on stereotypes do so is because it's comforting. What? You may be saying. It really is. As humans, we want to know. For survival, for security, for certainty of the best path we must follow as we move forward. And when we don't know how to interact with someone, when we don't know someone at all, we label them, which makes us feel more secure. But it is a false security. In reality, it is not true at all. But until we know better, we categorize everything we can as a way to understand. Ironically, we are actually limiting our ability to understand because we have made the assumption and then moved on without questioning it. So the next time someone around you makes an assumptive remark or laughs at someone for doing the unexpected for their particular gender, age, sex, position at the top, etc., don't participate. You don't have to correct them. That may just cause a confrontation that's unnecessary, but just simply refrain from feeding the fire, which will hopefully allow such discussion to die out more quickly. So number 5 is don't laugh with the crowd. Last but not least, we need to be aware of this one. Number 6, don't replace stereotypes with yet another stereotype. Without realizing it, when we recognize a stereotype and decide to let go of it, we can sometimes replace it with yet another stereotype. Such a response is actually quite human, as we want absolutes. As I said before, we want to know. And oftentimes we cannot know. We just can't. We have to just live with that uncertainty. For example, if we begin with the idea of nuns and what their behaviors should be, we limit them as individuals, and the rigidity becomes destructive to those who pursue the life as a nun as well as the institution itself. If a nun or a pope as Pope Francis is demonstrating, begins to behave in a contrary or unorthodox manner, gradually some may begin to stereotype what future nuns or popes should be based on the behaviors being exhibited by him. This too would be a mistake. This too would be stereotyping. Instead, we must allow the individual to be themselves, and we can embrace who they are. We can revel in it. We can try to understand it, but we must not use it as a mold for those who may look to the same or choose a similar path. So number 6, don't replace stereotypes with yet another stereotype. I highly recommend Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's 19-minute TED Talk video, The Danger of a Single Story. I recently came upon it, but it has been viewed by millions, and for good reason. Regardless of the stereotypes you may feel you have been subjected to or have unknowingly subjected others to, the first step is to acknowledge how they begin, so that then we can go about the business of defying and eliminating them. Because when we are relegated to a single box, our true gifts are stifled, our opportunities are limited, and since I know none of us wants to be put in such a situation, myself included, why would we put others in that same detrimental position? Power comes from within. It does not come from holding other people down. Eventually that dam will break, and the people who we could have been allied with all of their unique gifts and talents, will overcome us. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. I will provide links to that video that I mentioned, The Danger of a Single Story, as well as a few other episodes you may enjoy on this similar topic. For today's show notes, visit the blog, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast65. And now, let's get to today's Petit Plaisir. I'll see you in just a few. This week's Petit Plaisir is a film, a documentary, in fact, that will be released on the 14th of October, so for just a few days. And I had the fortunate opportunity of watching it over this past weekend at the Bend Film Festival. It's a spotlight of dancer Misty Copeland's rise to success. Since June 30th, 2015, American ballet theater dancer Misty Copeland has officially become the first Black female principal dancer at a major international company. And you may be wondering, what is a principal dancer? Wait a second, I thought she was a soloist for a while. She was, but a principal dancer, or simply called principal, is different. It's higher. It is the highest rank within a professional dance company. Other names you may have heard are prima ballerina. And while it is similar to a soloist, principal dancers are hired or promoted from within for a company to regularly perform not only solos, but also in pas de deux. It is a coveted position in any dance company, and it is the most prominent. It is the highest, as we said, that anyone can receive. So in her reaching that officially on June 30th of this past year, it was quite an accomplishment. The film begins with her at the age of 13, her journey, and it is narrated and co-produced by Misty Copeland herself. It debuted at the Tribeca Film Festival in April of 2015, and it covers her determination, the challenges of her injury, and the successes along the way. It is inspiring in its simplicity. It is inspiring in what we recognize of a dancer's life. It is not the black swan, as she explained on Stephen Colbert this last week, of all that torture and angst that we saw on the screen with Natalie Portman. It is, though, mystifying, no pun intended. And regardless of whether you like ballet or whether you are an athlete at all, hopefully, like me, it will inspire you and remind you to will what you want, as her Under Armour logo states. Here is a listen to the trailer.
I'm a Black dancer. That's who I am. It's so much a part of my story. I I first discovered ballet at 13. I had no exposure to it.
She always stood out. She had what you can't teach and you can't learn. She had a fire.
I didn't fit the mold. Based on my body type, pedigree, and background, I should not have been a part of one of the world's greatest ballet companies.
There's a lack of diversity in ballet. Where are the black ballerinas?
I don't think that the classical ballet world will ever accept me. I'm black. I have a large chest. I'm muscular.
We knew that something was happening.
She said to me, I'm in a lot of pain, Nelson.
The diagnosis is mid-tibia stress fracture.
I don't think anyone truly expected her to be able to come back from that.
I felt like I was going to let down so many people.
We were all sharing in the triumph of Misty dancing.
When she realized she could represent something even bigger, it became less about just herself and more about what she can do to change the world.
Through movement, I found my calling. Through ballet, I found my voice. My name is Misty Copeland, and this is my story.
A film worth watching to remind us that each of our paths, while it may appear difficult or maybe even impossible, is actually very doable if we're willing to take the courage within ourselves to make it happen. A Ballerina's Tale opens October 14th in theaters nationwide and on-demand video. I do think you'll enjoy. I know I did. I hope you've enjoyed this week's Petit Plaisir, where each week ideas are shared to make the everyday all the more enjoyable. Tune in at the end of each Monday's podcast, where I'll recommend a book, a film, a recipe, or from time to time introduce you to an expert who offers insight into how to live simply, luxuriously. Anything that is a simple pleasure to satiate your sophisticated taste. Thank you for tuning in to the SImple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. For more ideas and inspiration throughout the week, stop by the blog, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com, or pick up the book, Choosing the Simply Luxurious Life, A Modern Woman's Guide. Until next Monday, I'm your host, Shannon Ables. Bonjour!